Welcome back to the podcast. On this episode, we're probably going to get a little more into some of the niche aspects of animation. But for anyone who's looking to get into animation, particularly on a series that uses the program ToonBoom, which many do stick around because you might learn a thing or two. I should say at the top that this won't be a conversation on how to rig necessarily, but more on what it's like working in animation on a series or film that uses rig-based animation as a process. For anyone not familiar with the concept of rig-based animation, what I'm talking about here is creating a virtual puppet within your animation space that you can then manipulate once you've created that puppet. It's different from what's called full animation, in which you're drawing your character frame by frame by frame by frame. With puppet animation or rig animation, you can create that character rig. You can sort of like a virtual puppet, give him certain parameters, and then animate that character in a series or film. I took a course in ToonBoom animation with the animation house Sun and Moon Studios in Bristol, taught by animator Dan Keeble, who's worked on projects like the animated Doctor Who. He was gracious enough to come on the podcast so I could talk to him a little bit more, pick his brain more on just the processes of rigging animation, animated rigged characters, and so forth. So here's that conversation. I hope you find it useful. When you're approaching a character rig, there's definitely going to be sort of technical considerations depending on how complex or how minimalist the rig has to be. What are some of those technical considerations that you think about when you set out to create a particular rig?
That's a very good question. When I'm rigging, I'm always imagining that like I am the animator who's going to be animating this thing. And like when you rig it, like being a tech head and like wanting to play with the toys, like when I started out rigging, like often you're wanting to like find out all the bells and whistles and just like, right, let's just chuck it in. Oh, the animator's gonna love me. Like rig can do this, rig can do that. There's a tool that allows you to get overlapping action for free. Oh, I'll chuck that in. And then like inevitably you've made this thing be able to do everything, but because it's so complicated and like fussy to like use, the animator ends up like not using much of it or turning it off, or really you want like animation is done on the deadline, and also animation is done like there's a creative flow that you get into when you're animating, where you don't want to think that you're interacting with a puppet. You want to feel like you are animating that character. Like there's pencil miles, and there's also there's also digital pen clicks. Like the amount of clicks that it takes to get this character into this pose. Like an animator is going to want to do 5 clicks way over. Way more than they're ever going to want to do 50 clicks. So if an animator can get this character into this pose in 5 clicks, that's better than 6 clicks. That's better than 7 clicks. So yes, you want your character to be flexible, but you want to make sure that the animators actually use that flexibility. I think a simpler rig that's quicker to move into an appealing pose is much better than a complex rig that can do every appealing pose imaginable, but it would take the animator like half a day to just like move it around.
Interesting. That kind of makes me think in the realm of live action, one of the things when I was learning how to film, I was also learning to edit, and I found that a person becomes a much better shooter if he or she also has to edit their own footage. Because if you're out there shooting, you think, I've got it, this is great. But when you have to edit it, you see the angles that you got, you see all the footage you didn't shoot, you see all the stuff you overshot. And so I think it's sort of everyone who wants to learn to shoot should learn to edit. Is there a similar kind of comparison when you think about rigging? Is it sort of true that everyone who wants to rig should also animate those characters? Or do you think that just working with animators and getting that feedback, you can get sort of a similar kind of, feedback?
Yeah, I think I don't think someone would have got into the animation industry to learn to rig without having animated something. And so yeah, you can just like totally specialize in rigging and not be like a good animator whatsoever. But you might not be able, you might not be good at drawing, but you could like design a nice pencil. Do you know what I mean? Like you might not know how to draw something, but you might know you'll know that, oh, if the pencil is spiky, someone's not going to want to draw with it. Like you don't have to be like a master animator to know what an animator will need from a rig, I don't think.
Okay, that makes sense. And then just in terms of rig complexity, so there was a tutorial I watched one time on YouTube, and it was sort of how to animate in After Effects, and it was shape based, and it wasn't rigging necessarily, but I shared it with a friend of mine, and we both watched it, and the end result was really, really impressive. But to get there was so complex. I, for one, said, I think I'd rather just draw this thing and frame by frame. Is there a point at which you find yourself ever on a project or rigging a character that you think this can be done, or maybe it can't, but you'd be better off just drawing it frame by frame?
Yeah, for particular parts of the character, I'd say that's like I think most characters benefit from a rigged head because head positions look very similar as they turn around, and generally we're like shooting a character quite straight on, regardless of your like cinematography style, lots of your shots are going to be quite straight on to like head height to the character, because that's how I'm talking to you now. That's how we experience talking to one another on a daily basis. And that's how we want to see our animated characters, like at head height. So rigging a head, even on a very hand-drawn sort of traditional show, I think is useful. And there's lots of like time to be saved there. But even arms, rigging arms, like you can have an arm that's shaped like this, you can have an arm that's shaped like this, you can have an arm that's shaped like this, and like you could become the world's most amazing rigger, but in 2D animation, you're not going to get a rig that will satisfactorily like do all of these positions. So and especially hands, I don't think I ever really do any kind of rigging on hands, other than maybe separating off a thumb so that you can put an object in the character's hand. That is definitely just a position where it's always just redraws. And yeah, arm redraws, leg redraws. Yeah, torso again is another opportunity for a bit of rigging, because that you can more confidently rig and know that an animator is going to use it more often. But yeah, there's plenty of places and characters where just drawing it is just faster, easier, and creates a more appealing design at the end of the day.
When you're even assessing portfolios or watching a show, what stands out to you as this is a good rigger, or this is a good rig, versus this rig needs a little bit more work, or this rigger needs a little bit more time? Like how can you distinguish between even hiring someone for rigging? What do you look for?
I'm mainly looking to see if the character is still appealing once it's been rigged. I think on lots of kind of junior rigging reels, I see there's the character design, but then the rig might look slightly different, but like noticeably different, that it's just not quite so appealing. And as the character moves around, like the appeal is being lost as well. So I think it's a really important skill to make sure that you're not just rigging on autopilot. You're not just like, right, this is how I rig a character, and this is how I did my last one, this is how I'm going to do this one. To actually like study the character design and a pose sheet, if you've got pose sheets for that character, and make sure that your rig is accurate once it becomes a rig. And when it's arms start moving around, it's still looking appealing. Versus just stepping through the motions that you've learned, and then at the end of the day, the rig, it works, but outside of its kind of just sort of like relaxed pose, it starts to look like kind of ugly. I think that just comes with practice and just having a keen eye for design. I'm not a designer myself. I can draw the odd thing, but just understanding why a design is appealing and keeping those lines of actions through a character, and keeping the thing that's making that character look like that character.
That makes sense. So then, do you often work with character designers, and is there sort of a collaboration between you two when sort of figuring out, let's say maybe a designer is creating the character, maybe doing some post sheets. Would you work with that person to say, well, here's what I need the rig to do, or I don't think I can get the rig into this kind of position? How does that? Is there collaboration there, and what does that look like?
Well, the designer at Sun and Moon, Sam, we've been working really closely together for like the last 8 years or so. So like we know one another's process. But Sam doesn't hold back. Like he doesn't think, oh, Dan won't be able to rig that. He just draws what he wants. There might be some compromises that then do happen when it gets to rig stage, and Sam will just chat to me and say, oh, can ToonBoom do this? Like, would this just be an absolute fuss? Sam's as well as being focused on design, he's a generalist like me as well, so he knows how to design a character for animation. And I think that is probably when you are designing characters, you are designing characters for animation, which is different from designing characters for illustration or comics or whatever. So I think it's the same principles that a character designer has when they're designing a character for hand drawn, similar principles that you would when designing a character that's going to be rigged. You just when you're designing a character for to be hand drawn, you're thinking, right, every line that I put into this character is time that is going to be spent at animation. So how can I make the most appealing character that's as achievable as possible? You're not putting in 5 different layers of highlights and 2 different shadow passes, and generally animation is the character and then 1 shadow pass over the top of it. And it's those similar principles that actually work really well for translating a character design into rigging. That even though the animator isn't physically drawing all of those lines that's gone into the character design, they're still having to choose where those lines are going to be on screen, and every extra line that's added to a character is just an extra decision that the animator's having to make. So yeah, I'd just say it's similar kind of principles, really.
Okay. Do you create multiple character rigs for the same character? If let's say if it's more complex animation, so for instance, because of the limitations in After Effects, it might behoove me, if I were rigging a character, to create a profile rig, but then also a front-on rig, and maybe even a rig from behind. Do you find flexibility enough within ToonBoom to be able to create, for the most part, one single rig per character, or do you create multiple rigs per character?
Yeah, ToonBoom totally has the all of the ability to put an entire turnaround into a character. You can do it multiple different ways. You can get I don't know, I won't go into it too technically, but you can do it in a way that you rig a front-on position and then move the character's rig into three-quarter, and then into profile, and that might involve a bit of redrawing. But you can also in ToonBoom do it where you just completely draw the front perspective, completely redraw all of the elements for the three-quarter, completely redraw all of the elements for the profile, and you can put all of that into the same rig, and pivot points can update depending on which angle the character's at. So yeah, in a way you are building not different rigs, you're building one rig and then manipulating that rig into those different positions.
Okay. Interesting. So when it comes to a project like Doctor Who, is that, when something like that comes along, is that an intimidating project for you, knowing that you're going to be handling somewhat iconic characters and creating rigs that need to not disappoint in the animation?
It was definitely intimidating, because that was the first project that we ran in ToonBoom, which was like mildly insane. But we just had the drive to want, like, what we were excited about in ToonBoom was the master controller system, which is you put in a bunch of keyframes for a character's head movement, front on, three-quarter, profile, and then do a little bit of ToonBoom magic, and it gives you this little button on screen, which allows, like, wherever you move the button, your character's head moves around. And it was that key feature that really made us want to make the leap to ToonBoom for that particular project. There wasn't any other program out there, and other than After Effects, which you can do that in. I'm not sure there's any other 2D digital software that allows you to get that control over a character. And because it was, we were recreating a live action show, we wanted that subtlety of acting. We didn't want to be locked into this three-quarter pose and sort of like moving a small amount around there, and locked into a front on pose and moving a small amount around there. We wanted the animators to not be afraid of moving the head around on a tight schedule as well. So it was the master controller allowing for these just like subtle little head moves that just bring so much to performances that just made us make that leap to ToonBoom. But yes, it was intimidating. We even approached a studio who said that they were really proficient in ToonBoom, and that if we wanted rigging to come to them, we went to them, and they were just like, they were scared. They ran away. But that didn't deter us for some reason. We were like, no, it can be done, and we're going to do it. And we actually then approached Ollie Putland, who's got who makes ToonBoom sort of tutorial based stuff on YouTube, and he came in, and he was just like the complete opposite. He relishes a challenge and relishes a technical challenge as well. So he was just like, yes, let's do this. And and then we did the R&D. We bashed our head against the wall. This was when master controllers had just been introduced to ToonBoom, so they were a little more fussy to get working than they are these days. These days it's once you put the work in, it's a couple of clicks, but they hadn't quite ironed that out back then. But it was an amazing project. I'm really proud of. It's funny, I was thinking, I'm proud of the animation that was done. You can be proud of a rig, but the rig isn't really the thing that's sort of experienced. It's seen at the end of the day, but the rig isn't the thing that's experienced at the end of the day. The the thing that's experienced is the animation and the characters, and a rigger has done their job if the animation has just like gone up in quality that amount, or like animators have been able to bring that performance, just like raise the bar.
When you're creating a rig, do you have a particular sort of like rig testing process? Like, do you sort of run a rig through its paces, or do you tend to sort of send it off to production and say, if anything breaks, let me know and I'll see what I can change?
Rigging testing process probably does need to be more rigorous than it is. But I think that like stuff's always going to, like animators are always going to like push a rig in a way that you're not expecting, or there might be something that you hadn't realized is like going to be coming up in performances again and again and again. You do like, you make the best informed decision that you can at the time, and testing a character, I generally try to like put them in awkward poses to put them in. So I might like cross their arms, or have them like just like hugging their leg, or something like strange that if I can do this, then they can probably do like more simpler poses. So yeah, and try and get the character's rig away from its sort of default pose. Like just put it into some awkward, strange pose that will like raise some of the big issues that are in your rig. But yeah, inevitably animators are going to want other little extra things or something, or you might have just forgotten to connect that to this or whatever, and yeah, things will come back, but that's just part of the process.
Okay. And then kind of going back to Doctor Who a little bit, what did that do? What does that do for the studio at that time? Were you guys, after sort of completing this project, were you guys sort of invigorated, like, sweet, it works, we can do this? Did you guys sort of become a more capable studio in the eyes of clientele, or what? Sort of like, I feel like since Doctor Who was kind of the first project you guys took into ToonBoom for rigging, what was the path after that? Were you guys like, we're never rigging anything else ever again?
Most of our work is still short form animation. So we just pick the best tool for the job, and sometimes ToonBoom isn't that best tool. Sometimes the amount of time spent to rig a character for a like 20 minutes of content might not be worth it versus rigging a character for multiple hours of content. So we are experimenting more with using ToonBoom for shorter form content and just seeing how agile the program can be as well. But it's my go-to. I like to champion ToonBoom, but that doesn't mean it should be the go-to. Yeah, it's horses for courses, really.
Interesting. Is schedule and budget, are those some of the determining factors for when you will or will use this program versus that program, or what are some of the factors that you'll take into account before you decide this is the production workflow?
I think it's mostly the design. So we'll do concept work and not think about the workflow that we're going to use while we're developing characters and scenes and backgrounds and situations, and then then when we get to that stage and we might not have the final character designs or the final look of the whole thing, but we've got a concept image that we can all sit around and chat about. Then that's when we will choose the workflow that suits us.
Cool. Fascinating. You've alluded to this a little bit, but are there times when you either see what the animator has done with a rig and wish they'd understood the rig better, or see what an animator has done with a rig and find yourself impressed that they were able to do even that? Like, wow, you've really taken this rig into different places that I didn't foresee as the rigger. So I guess the question is, like, do animators surprise you for better or for worse with the rigs you've created?
I can't say that they've ever super surprised me. Like, no, I think, yeah.
I suppose they shouldn't.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the character should end up looking like the character at the end of the day, and it should be doing what it should be doing in the storyboard. Like, if they do anything too wildly, like, shocking, then yeah, maybe if you're making some sort of avant-garde piece of animation, then maybe there would be room for that. But yeah, hopefully the animator is just moving the character around super nicely in the way that you'd hoped that they would have.
Okay. Now, you guys this past Christmas did a little short called Timeless Gifts, and there's a sort of hand-drawn look quality to it. Just with the art direction for that. Does that how does that play into how you rig? Does that just sort of dictate the way you're going to do your line art?
I think I didn't rig those characters particularly differently. We did look at using ToonBoom to get the boiling line effect, but I think we ended up just using After Effects in the ends to get that boiling line. But it's more of an ethos to pass down to the animators to make sure that when an animator receives a rig, that they're not. Often when I started shots on that short, I animated on it as well. I roughly hand drew the movement I wanted. Often when I'm starting to animate with a rig, sometimes it's difficult to look past the rig, and you're almost sort of too afraid to move this thing around. And as you're moving it into different poses, like, you may not have like moved its arm into the correct pose yet, and it sort of starts to like or for me anyway, puts me off. Like, it kind of makes me start to forget the pose that I was trying to put this character in, or you think, oh, the rig can do this, so I want the arm to be like this, but the rig can just easily kind of put it in this position, so I'll just do that for now, and then that for now ends up in the show. So I think it's more of an ethos from an animation perspective to be that yes, you've got a rig, but when you start the shot, it depends on the schedule of the show, obviously, but like, hide it, draw just the 2 or 3 key poses, or as many of the poses that's required, like, without looking at that rig. I think something that comes out of animating rigged puppets is this very kind of like paper sort of pin. Like, if a character needs to move their hand from here to here, like, the easiest and I felt like the fastest way of getting that hand from there to there on a rigged puppet is to do this kind of clock motion, and always have the like character moving in these kind of like rotating their limbs always perfectly to camera. Whereas to move it their fastest and easiest in real life is in this direction. So it's putting the rig aside and drawing the characters coming closer to screen or moving further away or putting their limbs into perspective, getting that, even if you don't have time to draw that on a show, like just thinking about that third dimension and making sure that you're not just using the rig because it's easy to animate the rig in that way. Make sure that you're using the rig to like best serve the scene. And if a character, it also just makes the scene more dramatic, like a character coming closer, coming further away, using this like third dimension that's available to us 2D animators. Yeah, a rig should be helping you to make animation faster, but it shouldn't be helping you to be a lazy animator and just doing the thing that the rig wants to do. You should be not fighting against the rig, but like you shouldn't be allowing the rig to animate for you. Basically, you should be driving, and if the rig can't do that thing, then redraw it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good philosophy too. Have you had any rigs that over the years that just gave you a lot of trouble? In the end, turned out like, wow, this is a really challenging rig for one reason or another, whether it's the design turned out to be more challenging than anticipated, or the project itself, or have you been able to really kind of get a handle on those designs and rigs sort of up front before you really go into production?
So bringing it back to Doctor Who, those Doctor Who rigs did like the master controller elements of the character were really fun to animate because you could get such subtlety into it, but the character designs were more designed for kind of graphic novel illustrative type stuff. So there was lots of niggly lines inside the character and creases, and it just made the rigs. I think we all like. I learned a lot on that. Like it being my first project that we did that we used ToonBoom. I did over rig those characters, and I was putting deformers in every single crease because the animator will just be able to move that crease. They'll love me for it, but they ended up not doing so. We had to after those rigs had gone into production. People were finding that it was just slowing their computers down like crazy. So we then did some kind of not overhaul revisions, but we worked out which bits of our rig were really slowing it down, and made lighter rigged versions of the characters with the same functionality, but yeah, especially if a poor animator got given a crowd scene. Crowd scene with people cheering and clapping. Yeah, no one wants to be given a crowd scene particularly, but yeah, when you've got a crowd scene and all of the rig, like two or three rigs in the scene was kind of like slowing it down, let alone, more than that.
Do you watch a lot of animated series and shows and sort of dissect the rigs that you might be seeing?
Yeah, I do. I love behind the scenes like type, especially visual effects. I'm not in visual effects at all, but yeah, love that kind of. It's sort of like I kind of like magic and close-up magic as well. It's sort of that like how, and I also like knowing how the magic trick is done. That is the rigging, really. It's like it's the secret behind the magic. Well, the secret behind the magic of animation is being good at animation and studying movement, etc. But I am. When I'm watching shows, I am just thinking, right. So how would I rig that? Like, oh, how did they do that? And it's a great source of inspiration and looking for opportunities to put things that I see and then try to backwards engineer it in my brain to then put it into our own characters.
And then I noticed in Timeless Gifts, I saw you were an animator and rigger, but also props rigger. Is that what's that?
What's prop rigging? So just if there's a prop that has moving parts, it needs rigging. And I can't remember the particular props that needed loads of. Oh, the bike was the most rigged prop on it, but it's just the. I mean, it's not the same as rigging an animated character, but you are just trying to make sure that you're putting in all of the like options that an animator will need to like deliver the shots of the show.
Okay. Now you talked about how you like to sort of dive into new programs and learn new software, and kind of brought ToonBoom to Sun and Moon Studios, and it worked out. But in my experience, you've taken that knowledge and that software to other people. I first met you in a rigging course, even though I'm in the US and you're in the UK. So can you talk a little bit about sort of the drive and the desire to, I mean, in some ways, like taking ToonBoom's rigging to the studio was just the beginning, at least for your studio. Even now, you're sort of taking it out and training others remotely. Is that about just building up the industry around you, or strengthening competition, or what brought that about?
Our main sort of driving force for that was that I don't know what it's like in America, but universities in the UK, there seems to be there's a gap between graduating from university and the knowledge that's needed for industry, and that can be filled in by doing work experience and internships. But we just want, like, people were coming out of universities in our area like without knowledge of the programs that we needed them to know, we just when we were hiring new people from university, we were having to spend quite a bit of time just teaching them those tools. So we just think we've had plenty of conversations with the universities around us, and we do like industry visits, but and I've also ran courses for universities now because of the success of our course. But yeah, that was the main driving factor of us wanting to create courses, is just plugging this gap. I don't know what, like, there doesn't, I guess it's difficult for university lecturers to be up to speed with every single program that the industry requires, and to be up to speed with all of the latest tools and techniques, unless you're like actually working in the industry. Then there is going to be that that knowledge gap, I guess. So yeah, we're just trying to plug it up a bit, help people out.
Dan, thanks for your time. I've enjoyed just kind of learning more about kind of rigging and how you guys attack it at your studio. So I do appreciate you sharing all of your insights. I think it's really, really helpful. Certainly helps me, and hopefully people who might be listening.